Today, we are joined by none other than Maxxflyer, the head of the Cypher Party delegation. And Max, welcome to the show. What brings you here today?
Hello, thank you for this invitation. It is very nice to find you guys. I hope you are doing well. I'm here to resume what happened during this first experimental cycle of delegation inside the Ethereans Labs operative system OS. So basically, maybe we can start from the beginning. 7 years ago, Ethereum was built, and a lot of things happened so far. We had several waves of tools. The first one was the wave of ICOs. The second one was very likely the wave of NFT, when tokens became more sophisticated. Then we had the first metaverses like crypto voxels. Then we had the wave of DeFi, okay, and suddenly all the people started talking about DAOs. Actually, in the Ethereum community, we started talking about DAOs from the beginning with the DAO, if you recall. Okay, it was one of the greatest experiences and experiments of all times. It was a failed one because of an hack, because of a piece of code written in the wrong way, basically. And so we had to wait many years to hear the community talking again about DAOs with excitement. And so yes, basically a few months ago, maybe almost 1 year from now, people are starting talking about DAOs, saying that the next wave will be the wave of DAOs. As I explained in a previous interview, I have my personal idea about DAOs because I believe all of us in the Ethereum community are looking for a different future based on autonomy. But at the same time, we are a community without much experience from this point of view. And the reason is during the last 1,000 years, we used to live not in a condition of autonomy. We didn't have the tools. We used to have leaders. And so basically, we are programmed to work organized into group, but to have leaders, basically. And I believe this makes a big difference, okay? Because we must learn how to behave like groups, how to slowly remove the leadership, or possibly how to experience different levels of leadership, basically. And I found in OS a great experiment from this point of view, because on one side, we have the team that is basically ruling the research and development. And on the other side, thanks to this protocol they are building, that is a protocol for DeFi, a protocol for NFTs, and as well a protocol for organizations, DAOs. This protocol particularly has these tools for the creation of delegations. Okay, so delegations are a try, in my opinion, to give a responsibility to the community. So we can have a kind of dual situation based on a principle of duality, where on one side we have the main team ruling their own research and development. On the other side, we have a community with the tools to organize itself into groups we call delegations. And in the middle, we have basically the treasury coming out of a mechanism of fair inflation that is constantly filling the treasury with money. And what happens? What happens that delegations or people from the community can organize themselves, create groups, and somehow try to put their hands on the treasury. Okay, so we created this delegation known as the Cypher Party, with the aim of trying to use some of this money coming from the treasury in order to promote public goods, and it was a nice experiment, because first of all, it was very likely the first time ever in the Ethereum community where a project, an official project, allows the community to manipulate the treasury. Okay. On the other side, this is the first time where really, in total autonomy, we had the opportunity to implement, or if you will, extend the idea of the former team, the central team, with our idea of the future, with our idea of the project, because in Ethereum, basically, there is a lot of people who is just investing. They are passively approaching tokens and project, simply, how to say, investing, they are selling, then maybe they don't come back anymore. But there's a strong bone of users that get somehow, how to say, strongly tied to a project, and usually these people are nerds, okay, people that is deeply involved in the community. Reason why they have their own ideas, they have their own understanding of the ecosystem and the technological environment. So they have the, how to say, they have the skills to extend the complexity behind the vision of a project. And this is exactly what happened here. Basically, we introduced this idea of using part of the treasury for the creation of public good for this Ethereans lab ecosystem. And we voted it in a kind of liquid democracy using the tools offered by OS. And nothing, very simply, part of a bunch of money were destined to the creation of Dune analytic dashboards. The reason is that OS, as I said, is a set of complex protocols working on the Ethereum blockchain for DeFi, for NFT, for organization, for delegation, for proposals, and so on. And all these things can work together. And this kind of system can produce a lot of data. Since we live in a world based on information, data are everything. If you don't display this data, basically, this data is like not existing. So the idea was to somehow promote the creation of a series of dashboards intended to display all this data, or try to see what is the limit of the how to say, the limit of this process we are approaching, because you can create organization, okay, you can see the coin moving back and forth, you can have proposals and so on, but of course at some point you need a kind of overview, and an overview allows you to follow and to understand better what is going on. And so nothing, few months ago, after voting and accepting this first proposal, we managed to involve some of the wizards from Dune Analytics that are part of the Dune Analytics community. And some of them accepted and started creating some basic queries for OS. And this is how everything started. Then step by step, other people came in. JPN, that is, you see it on the screen as Bucky Boomer, and later started with curiosity, I imagine, and somehow after a while he got even involved inside Ethereans Labs team. So basically, resuming, this was a great experiment, because for the first time, let me repeat it, we saw a project with its own process and evolution, growing a treasury, okay, and this money spent by an emergent set of groups of people from the community organized into delegation, and we saw them basically steering somehow, or how to say, influencing. Let me use this word since lately is a very popular word. We really influenced the creation of OS somehow, I believe, and this is the reason why I think With this first cycle, now we close a very first experimental step where we prove that it is really possible for a project to have a kind of liquid democracy and create different levels of governance and at the same time different level of leadership because there is the main team. There are these little delegations that are somehow another level of leadership, and also there is the community that is passively following what is going on. And so this complex system is something that at the moment only, in my opinion, OS is offering. And I believe, according to my personal vision of the future, I believe that this is exactly the way to go because, of course, how to say, democracy is a complex thing. Okay, it is complicated. It can fail for many reasons. This experiment didn't fail. This doesn't mean it won't fail in the future. But we made the first step. So this is what happened, and I'm very somehow excited and happy to see that we got to the point where a lot of work was done following the Cypher Party inputs. And on the other side, I'm also a bit proud because, of course, our idea became a reality. Okay, so this is more or less the resume.
Yeah, and thanks, Max. You definitely sort of highlighted how I got pulled into the team here. It was responding to your guys' bounty call for Dune Wizards, and to start doing some analytics for the projects, and that's how I first started digging into some of the on-chain data that Ethereum's OS is producing, and built up a dashboard in response to your bounty, and one thing led to another, and now I'm very fortunate to be able to spend my time writing more queries for the team and for the protocol. And we have some exciting news. Over the past couple of months after getting hired on by the team, I've worked with Max here some, and we have rejuvenated the call for Dune Bounty here. And we're looking for more wizards, either from the community or from active Dune wizards right now, to start digging into some of the other on-chain data that we have, particularly around factories and items. And we're going to have some more details on that being released, but this is the official call to action that we have more bounty to be offered for people who are willing to get in there and start writing Dune queries. And that's going to lead us right into the start here. So what is Dune, just a little bit, and how can someone get started with Dune? Well, it's actually fairly easy, and I'm going to type a few things over here in the audience chat. I have a figure. The first thing that we had to do with Dune is we got a bunch of the contracts uh, for the various aspects of the protocol decoded into Dune. So what Dune does is they look at the on-chain data. They look at events and calls to smart contracts that are happening on the Ethereum mainnet, as well as some layer twos, particularly relevant for us, Optimism. They look at those for a particular contract, and as long as you submit the contract for verification through Dune, they'll start taking that data and putting it into a very large database of just raw data scraped from the blockchain. And over in the audience chat, I have a picture of that here. It just shows some of the most recent contracts that we've had Dune to code. There's the factory of factories on Optimism. There are the colony contracts, all of the ERC wrappers for items, the items main interface. All of those contracts have now been approved and are in Dune for people to begin querying. And now that it's in there, it's actually super easy for anyone, whether you're an experienced wizard to someone who maybe is just starting with the protocol, or perhaps is just very interested in OS, who wants to start probing some of the data to get started. And so the easiest way I know to get started is to start from a blank query and begin writing one. So we're going to write a very simple query. I have the link to a blank one here. And when you open up a new query, you just make a free account on Dune. You don't have to pay any money. You just give them a name and an email address, and they'll let you spin up an account. And you can there's a button right on their main page everywhere to start writing a new query. And the simplest way to do that is to look at decoded projects. And Ethereans is the name that we're under all over Dune. And if you look, there's actually a whole bunch of different contracts, already decoded that pop up here when you go to write a query. One of the more interesting ones for me is like the factory of factories, because there is a lot of data there. And the way you write a query is the simplest way is to just write select star, and that just says I'm going to pull all the data from a particular thing. And then you can just click over on the left side which function you want to pull it from. So one here is just the pay fee through the factory of factories. And if you run that, it should just take a few seconds. You do select star from, and then the name of the contract you want, and it'll go through and actually pull all of that data. So Davey, the screen is it's going to show up in the recording. For here, just follow along with the links I'm posting. So the query right now just looks something like this. That's all we have to do to actually go ahead and get started, and that pulls in all of the data for this particular function. So this is looking every time someone pays a fee through the factory of factories, it goes ahead and goes through this function, and this goes and logs all of those. And this pings back a whole bunch of data, and we're not necessarily curious about all of it necessarily, but it's kind of cool to see. And then another typical line I add at the end of queries is to go ahead and just order by, and then it's ordered by call block time descending. And when you do that, it just orders everything by the time those transactions happened. And so with a query that simple, you can actually go through and look at everything coming off of one of those smart contracts in order of the time that it was released. And so with that, you can start seeing some of the things that are logged. The contract address, the fee receiver, so that's who is getting paid from these various queries. And I think all of them right now are the Ethereans lab, or the Ethereans OS treasury here. There's how much of the fee got paid and what token this was a part of. 0x000 is WEF, and then I think the other common one that shows up here is OS. And you can start sorting by those various things. But it's very simple to go ahead and just with those 3 lines of code, see everything that's coming from a contract. And it's after that that you can start doing, other things. You can start adding in conditionals here, only pulling certain bits of the data. But this is where I start almost all of the queries that I've been writing. You start with just select star, pull all of the information to be able to get a feel for what's there from whichever contract and either call or event that you want to probe. And then I typically add in the order by call block time or event block time descending, just so that everything's in a temporal order, so that it's a little bit easier for someone to understand it. That way they're not all jumbled up. You can get some feel for, these are the most recent transactions. And of course, with some of these, so if you look at the that query should be updated now that I've have it in there and run it. So everyone should be able to see the text there as well and what bounces back from this. That's when you start making some more complicated things. You might say, oh, this might be an interesting transaction to go look at. I'm wondering what's going on here. Well, you can just pull the transaction hash into Etherscan and start getting an idea about what was going on there uh, through Etherscan's view of things. Dune's really nice to track things long-term over time trends. Etherscan, if you want to dive into a particular transaction, I use the two in tandem. So if anyone here is looking to potentially start probing the contracts that we have in response to this bounty, we're going to be looking at items contracts, and we're also going to be looking at the factories contract, including the factory of factories. So this is how you would go ahead and get started with one of those. And for example, I have one here. This is another query that's been written, and this one's already done and written. But this one is looking at the amount of OS that has been burned. And if you take a look at it, I'll go ahead and post the entire uh, SQL code that it is comprised of. All I'm doing here is I go through and I select the amount of the token. I sum that amount for cumulative, and then I also look at the time so that I can track this amount over time. And we're looking at the call burn function. So every time OS is burned, this function gets called, and that amount of OS goes ahead and gets burned. And this happens a couple of different ways. This is happening primarily through the treasury buybacks, but it's also happening as the fees get paid through the factory of factories. A small bit of OS can be burned when people are pulling liquidity. Some of the liquidity rewards when they're rewarded in OS get burned. I look where the call success is true. That way we're only looking when OS was actually burned and not failed transactions. And then, of course, we order by call block time so that we have everything in a nice temporal order. So this is a real nice thing that with 4 lines of code, you can get that, and then you can create a visual of it. And there's a couple of different visuals that Dune lets you really simply create. On that page, you just hit new visual, and you can go from counters to area charts to line graphs to bar charts, any sort of thing that you can think of. There's a lot of basically pre-made visuals that Dune has that you can go ahead and be tracking. So the counter is just to see the most current pull of that, and then the area chart lets you actually see over time how is the amount of OS being burned changing with time. You can then go into more complicated ones. And so here's another one that we have here. This one is, this was one I've recently posted over in the hackers chat. So this query that was written is actually one that's in Dune's new V2 engine. And what Dune V2 allows you to do is rather than query just a single blockchain, you can actually query multiple blockchains within the same query. So what this one's doing, if we take a look at it, it is selecting a couple of different bits of data here. It's looking at what this one's looking at the different Uniswap pools created across both Ethereum and Optimism, and what's when those pools were created, what the fees are, and what the pool address is, so that people can dive into those a little bit. And so for this one, it just goes through and selects the tokens, token A and token B, the 2 tokens that are making up that pool. What the fee is as responded by Uniswap, what the pool address is, and then we're also making a link out of that pool address, selecting what network it is, and then when the call block time as when this pool go ahead and got created. And the first part of this query looks at the optimism side of things. So it's looking from Uniswap v3 optimism factory call create pool. And then the second half of this query is looking at Uniswap v3 Ethereum factory call create pool. So Uniswap does things similarly to OS in this regard. That they've deployed the same contract across both Optimism and Ethereum, and it makes it really easy to query both here. So every time that gets called and new pools are created, they go ahead and get labeled in here. And we can do some really cool stuff with that. Besides just seeing what tokens it made up, we can create links to the Uniswap analytics for those particular pools. And when you click on one of those, it will take you directly to the Uniswap links. And these are dynamic links that are going to update as new pools get created. It's creating this link based on the pool. They're not static. So every time a new pool is created, it'll go ahead and show up there with the appropriate link to the Uniswap analytics. So you're not restricted to just what Dune can go ahead and show. You can link out to other analytics tabs that maybe lay things out a little bit different, give you a little bit more insight. But that's not all. Queries can get a little bit more complicated. And once you start combining a couple of queries and getting some ideas together, you build up dashboards. And here is one of the dashboards. It's currently in beta there, but this is for the delegation voting. We also have similar ones for the main the main voting ones, the OS ups tracker. And that's actually this one right here. And if you look at the OS ups tracker, there's actually 3 separate queries that make up this larger dashboard. There's a top one, which is just for query results. And that is just looking and pulling each time a new proposal is created, it goes ahead and puts it in there. And then based on that, you can also pick any one of those proposals and look at the actual voting statistics for it. So within there, the query results is a fairly simple query by itself. I'll go ahead and link that one here in the chat as well. So this one's actually a fairly simple one of the queries. This is just looking at the proposal manager. Every time it emits the event proposal terminated, that's when the proposal's been executed, or proposal created. This is when the proposals first get proposed. It looks at those events, pulls the proposal ID, the time, and then I go ahead and give them a label, and it lists them out there. And then when you look at the votes for, it's a little bit more complicated. There's a lot going on in one of these, and I'll go ahead and link it here real quick. If anyone wants to take a look and follow along. So the queries begin to get a little bit more complicated when there's more complicated things you want to do. So for example, in the votes for Ethereans Labs, the first thing I do within this query is I want to go ahead and figure out what the circulating supply of OS is. It's not super simple to find that in Dune. You actually have to go through and look at all the events that mint OS tokens, all the events that burn OS tokens, and sum them together to figure out what the current circulating supply is. And so that's what the first part of this query is dedicated just for figuring out what the OS supply is. We then go through, pull in the proposal data, give it the same names that we had before, and then we look at the different votes. And the votes come from a couple different events. They're from the Ethereans proposal manager. So this is the root proposal manager, not the sub-DAO proposal manager. And the events that get emitted are accept for a yes vote, retire accept, which means you withdraw a yes vote, and then also refuse and retire refuse for a no vote and retire a no vote. We combine all this data for these different votes. We start summing it together. We look to make sure the proposal ID matches the proposal ID that we want to go ahead and look at. With that circulating supply, we're calculating what percent we are to quorum, what percent we are to the max cap. And we're looking for, where the date of a vote equals the circulating supply for that particular date. And that's how we're generating all of that. And it's from this one query that we get most of the views that are back on this dashboard here. It knows how many votes we have for, and based on the circulating supply, it lets us know what percent of quorum we are, what percent of max cap we are, tracking the votes over time. It also knows which voter voted each time, and a couple of them are named in here, particularly the delegations. So you can see when one of the voters is Cypher's or Ethereans PL, uh, how much their votes contributed to the total. And for this one, it was about a third. For this latest OS ups, it was about a third came from those two delegations voting for the proposal. That made up about a third of the overall number of votes. And as I sort of mentioned before, if you go in here and look, you can change which OS ups you're looking at. So you can go back and look historically at other proposals. For example, the OS ups 2, where we were buying 100 F worth of OS for the fall project, what that vote tally looked like. And this is using, for calculating quorum and max cap, this is using the circulating supply when those votes were coming in. So everything here is dynamic and will scale nicely as we move forward. So as more OS ups are in, I don't have to go through and recopy what the current circulating supply is here. I don't have to go through and manually input anything. All of this is going to get scraped from the on-chain data very nicely, put together, and so future OS ups are all going to fall into that same dashboard, and they're able to be tracked in nearly live time here. It takes sometimes it takes a minute or two for Dune to scrape the data off of the blockchain, but once it gets it, this can update almost immediately. So that was those. That was those. And then I wanted to go ahead and share one other thing here. There's something, and I don't know if anyone necessarily talked about it or noticed it as we were tracking the latest OS ups. But if you look for that dashboard for OS ups in particular, let me repost the link for everyone here. If you look at that dashboard there, what you can notice the author of it, and the author of it's no longer just JPN. This one's actually done by the Ethereans Labs team. We have created our own. We have our own team on Dune now, so this is actually going to be one of our forward-facing public, like a Twitter handle or a YouTube page. This is going to be some other way that people can go through and find us. And so we are officially a team on Dune Analytics, and I think we're currently on the second page of teams. With a couple more stars, we can make it up to the first page. So if anyone spins it up and likes the dashboard, hit the little star up here, and that helps our visibility. But we have this, and this was sort of the first dashboard that we created that is ready for prime time on the Ethereans Labs main page. We want to be going through, and we don't just want to have a dashboard for just voting. We want to have one that encompasses everything from factories. We want to have one that encompasses everything of items, both wrapped items and native items. We want to have ones that highlight particular, any organization that launches, they could have a ready-made dashboard where all they need to do is know, what their host contract is, and then it can pull in all of the data for a particular organization. We want to be tracking governance routines. And I was hoping, I've been working on that here. It's one of the things the team's been working on. And Dune, every week, publishes a digest. And in their digest for 42, they were mostly talking about some of the tornado cash fallout and some other stuff. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom of that page, they have a thing for more dashboards where they're going through and scraping stuff off of their webpage, looking at some of the new dashboards that have been created. And they actually found one of mine that I had launched, that I was starting to work on and was currently in beta. And that was this one. I'll post the full link here. This one's not yet on the official team page. It still needs work, but Dune sort of leaked it out to the world, so it's not very private. And this is sort of where we see some of the future for Dune being among the Ethereans Labs team, is trying to mix in the very nice infographics that we have, all of the information that we find in the docs, and bringing it, uh, bringing some of the live data into it. So it's on this dashboard, that current OS supply that we were sort of calculating when we were looking for our voting proposals. It's posted right here, and this is updating live. So every time OS is minted or burned, the current supply of OS gets updated at the top of this dashboard. It shows our business model for the protocol in here, from the fee-based business models with factory fees, to how OS inflation is working with the treasury splitter and the weekly token sales and the investment fund. And we have a tab here that shows, we've got a couple of points in that flow chart where OS gets burned. Well, we have a counter that shows how much OS has been burned through those various mechanisms. We have the treasury splitter and the treasury splitter income. How much ETH is currently in the treasury splitter? How much has come from inflation, from investments, from other grants, and from the fee-based business model? Over all time, how much has gone through? We've had almost 200 ETH worth flow into the earnings splitter, and that is powering the Ethereum's OS protocol here. And you can track each one of those, not just for this latest quarter, but all time, how much has come from these various sources. Checking and seeing how those graphs look different here. You can look at down a little further. You can see, we talk about where does the money go from the treasury splitter. Well, in the infographic, it's real nice. It says, we have 8% going to the root treasury, 27% to dividends, 25% to the investment manager, and 40% to delegations. But incorporating this into Dune, we can go ahead and show exactly how much this last quarter went to the root treasury, how much went to the dividends, how much went to the investment manager, to delegation grants, and have those historical amounts down here. We can break down inflation based on the most recent calls. So this is the inflation from this most recent call earlier today, actually, just a few hours ago. How much OS went to the farming rewards? How much got sold for ETH in the Uniswap pool? Of that ETH, how much went to the private treasury and how much went to the public treasury? And then you can also have, additional statistics for, historically, how much has been sold for ETH. Every day, how much has been sold? What does that graph look like? We can track the investment funds here, both the old one and the new one that was just created with OS, the upgrade proposal number 3 here. And we can see what the value of those assets over time looks like. And we're going to keep adding to this dashboard to include stuff from the fee-based business model, from items being transferred. Mostly here, we're going to be looking at, the factory of factory fees, the farming fees, the inflation factory fee. How are those contributing to the business model here? How do those investment funds look? Making more powerful queries to look at the profit and loss that OS has accumulated with its different investment funds here. And so this is what we see as some of the future here, is making these dashboards that are incorporating not only really nice infographics to sort of describe how our organization works, how items work, how factories work, but to back that up with the data that is coming in live, so that people can say, oh, maybe you can introduce a fee-based business model into your factory, but does it actually generate revenue? How much is it generating? Well, we're going to be able to show all of that uh, in real time, so that people wanting to build on the platform have accurate, up to the minute information for those different revenue streams, how item transfers look, where they're being sold, uh, how much is in Uniswap pools that were created by factories, etc. So this is one of the things that we've been imagining, and that we're going to continue to work on, is really incorporating nice infographics with live data. And one of the main reasons that we can do this at all is because of the way Ethereum's OS is. We're all on chain, which means that none of this data is being pulled in from different abstractions. We don't have to pull off chain data, write it into a database, and then uh, query that. All of this data is able to be generated on chain. We can pull all of it directly from the smart contracts that have been deployed. And that's one of the real nice things with Ethereum's OS. We're all on chain, which means Dune is an excellent tool to be querying all of that data that's getting created. Just checking in on the Discord chat. Adjust the font size. Yes, there are ways to adjust the font size. So for some of the dashboards, it is currently in a beta state here. But within each of these, you can go in and edit, and within the text widget, you can change the size of some of those widgets. You can change the text size some within there, but it's done from the creator of the database, not just from an end user one. But I think it's something Dune's aware of, that can sometimes be an issue.
This is beautiful.
Thanks, Max. Yeah, and this one is the economics overview, and we're looking to go ahead and not just have one for the economic model, but as I was saying, all of the factories. Pull up, here's a list of all the factories. This is how much OS has been burned through those different factories. Have a list of factories, and you can choose which factory to look at it more in depth and see how much how much revenue has been generated on a per factory basis. Combine that with some of the beautiful art and beautiful infographics that Ethereum's OS has, and shout out to the artists who are making these, because these are gorgeous, and I love being able to combine them with the on-chain data here to really paint a nice picture for our economic model here, to how factories are going to look, how many times a factory has been cloned, how many contracts are there, what are the Uniswap pools that are associated with those factories, all sorts of really, really awesome stuff that we're able to do because of the structure. And this is sort of a small slice of it. This is just the economic model. We have lots of queries to write for the items, lots of queries to write for the factories. And that is where, to bring it back around, that's where Ciphers is coming in here. This new push for queries here is going to help us build the next dashboards like this, where we're able to go through and have all of those queries for different factories, and have cards that say, this is what the supply is, or this is how many unique factories we have. This is how many times a particular factory has been cloned and deployed. This is how much revenue has come from this series of factories.
Yes, you see, sorry to interrupt you. At the beginning, when developers created the first Ethereum contracts, okay, everyone was building some kind of independent contracts. Then after a while, because actually the idea of Ethereum is that when you publish a contract, it is like a library inside a computer. Okay, so it took a while before the community started talking about Lego contracts. Lego contracts are a kind of contracts that aren't meant to be independent. They are meant to communicate with other contracts. Okay, so the problem is here we have a similar situation where you can query only the data that are available. But of course, in the moment the community gets used to watch this information, later they start asking for more information because they have even more ideas. And you get to the point where you realize that your contract could expose more information that is not exposing at that moment because um, um, that's the point. We are talking about factories producing a contract, and we see how many times that factory was triggered, how many times this contract produced an income. So step by step, I believe we could really, with a bit of standardization, imagine to how to say define some standard typical functions inside the contracts that are meant to be queried later. Okay, so because the operation of data mining I'm watching here, I have to tell first of all that this is already beyond what was expected as a result. Okay, so it's very cool, basically. And I imagine also Dune is going to evolve step by step. This kind of chart, this kind of infographics, dynamic is beautiful. If you can add links, click, connect different infographics together, this is going to become something that is, how to say, really a kind of living interface, okay, where the community can really interact with Ethereum OS and have a real overview of what is going on. Otherwise, um, so at the moment, the community, when you talk about Ethereum with the people, they say, "Oh yes, Ethereum is the second most important coin in coin market cap." No, Ethereum is not the second most important coin. Ethereum is a decentralized computer with a smart contract, so it should be introduced in a completely different way. But the problem is the community is really missing this kind of tools. And in the moment they have a perception of what a project is, what a project can do, what a project is doing, this is really going to change the perspective and also the relationship between the community and the various projects. So, yeah, I believe that there is really no limit. So, the cipher parties still have a bit of money inside the treasury, and this mostly will be used for this. At this point, I believe, unless there are new ideas and new inputs. Lately, the community started talking about privacy because there was this problem with Tornado Cash. And this is, of course, a sensible problem. But yes, part of the next bounties will be to extend even more what we are doing here, and so keep going on because this is beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Max. And yeah, that's one of the things we're hoping here is, developers, when they're launching a factory through the factory of factories with a fee-based business model, they don't have to write new analytics to track how their factory is performing. That'll be available to them through one of these Dune dashboards here. They'll just have to go through and select their factory from a list, and they will have the the analytics for it pre-built for them. They won't have to do anything. We're trying to make it super easy so that developers can build something and immediately have analytics for it. As organizations launch, they will immediately have analytics for their organization to be able to start tracking their performance. And of course, if an organization launches and they have some specific stuff, they'll be able to forecast dashboards. That's one of the other cool things with Dune that I wanted to mention is If anyone else is starting out or wants to start writing stuff, both queries and entire dashboard can be forked with a single button, and that'll just copy what's in here, pull it into your own profile, and you can go through and be free to start editing things, changing things, tweaking things around. And that's a little bit about how I started. I'd go through and find, a visual or an analytic that I'm like, oh, that would be something really cool to have with Ethereans OS. I'd take it, I would fork it, and just tweak what I knew how to tweak, whether it was a contract address, a wallet address, etc. And that's how I started building some of those queries. And one thing led to another, and now I have 300 line queries to track voting here. But we think that data is a very powerful tool, and that Ethereans OS is sort of uniquely positioned in some ways to provide a lot of really powerful analytics to projects launching on it from the get-go, because we have those hyperstructure type things, the factory of factories, all items being part of the same collection, just different virtual collections. We have some of that overall architecture that's going to make it really nice to track the data that's created by the protocol. And I think we have a few minutes. If anyone has any questions, head on over into the audience chat, drop them here. I will try my best to go ahead and answer them. And keep an eye out for more and new queries as they come out. I'll be dropping a couple in the Discord as they come out. Again, if anyone was following, I dropped the one for the different OS pools the other day over here in the Discord. So they all got to see that earlier. I recently found earlier this morning, there was someone who made a really beautiful dashboard for Uniswap pools, being able to track them nicely. And all they need is the pool address. So I'm going to add another column here where it'll link directly to their dashboard, input that pool address, and we'll use other people's analytics as well and sort of piggyback off of some of this. So we'll have the OS pools, and you'll be able to visualize it through what some other people are doing. And Dune is all very open. If you want to fork queries or go look at other people's queries, that's highly encouraged among Dune wizards. So go through. If you want to go ahead and start, I gave you a short little tutorial about how to go ahead and start just using select from. Pick one of the contracts that we have decoded. There's, oh goodness, I think we're close to 50 contracts decoded at this point. Maybe even over that. Decoded for the project. So there is an absolute wealth of data to be queried, to be aggregated, and to start looking for important trends in there. And it really only starts with a question. I think my first question when I was trying to answer when I was looking at Dune is, okay, how's the investment fund performing? What's the best token in the investment fund? Are there any tokens we should look about changing? And it was that question that got me to, fork a query that was looking at tokens in an individual wallet. From there, we got on to a lot of other analytics for the project, and it's been a lot over the last 3 months, and we're gonna keep digging away at the data for many months here to come, and trying to aggregate it together so that everyone in the Ethereans OS community has the data to make the decisions they want to make when it's voting time, to help better the project. We're just surfacing that data so that everyone here can make those good informed decisions about the protocol, because it's in the hands of voters here. And yeah, I'm not seeing any questions. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you still have any questions, feel free to post them. I'll hang around audience chat for a little bit, but we will go ahead and wrap it up here. Thanks for attending, and I will see you at the next one.